I'm Dominique McMullen, and you are listening to The Wellness Project. Now in its third season, shot here in the beautiful, iconic offices, this is the podcast that helps you learn to thrive in all aspects of your life. Today, we are deep diving, quite literally at points, into the world of resilience, fear, and pushing the limits of human potential. My guest is Claire Walsh. She was the first female to represent Ireland at the World Freediving Championships. She is also a TEDx speaker and an author of Underwater: How Holding My Breath Taught Me to Live. Claire has ventured to extreme depths on a single breath, but her story is about so much more than freediving. It is about mindset, trusting yourself, letting go, and learning to find peace in discomfort. So looking forward to this chat. The Wellness Project is sponsored by Activia and Irish Life Health. Claire, welcome.
I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, it's really nice to have you
Thank
here.
you.
We were saying when you came in, I feel like I know you.
I know. and like that's such a good thing from Instagram. You can kind of feel connected to someone without having met them.
Yeah, it's lovely. When I was doing my research on you, the first thing that I noticed and that I wanted to ask you about is somebody who grew up in Kildare having such a relationship with the sea, like being the first Irish woman to represent Ireland at the World Freediving Championships.
I know, I should have been a jockey who would have been far more on brand. Yeah, I know it feels really strange, but like I'm from Leixlip, so yes, it's technically in Kildare, but I don't feel like I'm a pure lily white. And like my grandmother lived in Dunleary, so every Sunday was spent traipsing out, walking the pier. And I think from about 14, 15, I used to get the train and the dart out to stay with her. So kind of swimming in the 40-foot was kind of part of regular life. But that relationship or that grow for the sea definitely comes from my dad. My dad is terrific at playing, and like from a really young age, you know, it was the 80s, early 90s, so we weren't getting on a plane to go anywhere for sure. So all family holidays were to somewhere in Ireland. Mm-hmm. And I just remember, you know, days and days and days in the beach, and you're wearing like tracksuit bottoms because it's freezing and a wind cheater, but you're still on the beach. And you'd still always swim. So this idea of not getting the water because it's too cold never really was a thing. So going back to dad, like we would play in the water for what felt like hours. And that is something that is so... It's a core memory, as the kids would say. It is absolute core memory of summers all throughout my childhood of playing in the water. And it is one of my favourite things that he's passed on to me.
That's lovely. So there is a relationship with the sea from the beginning of your life.
Definitely.
Yeah. Freediving.
Are you going to ask why?
Literally, it's like I just say it with an exclamation point and a question mark. I mean, it's known as, before you even came in, I was talking to some of the team and they're saying, freediving's so dangerous. Like it's one of the world's most dangerous sports, or that's what it's known as.
And that's so jarring for me. And I know every time, certainly when I was promoting the book or, you know, there was an interview, I would guess the headline before I read the article, and it's always something about the second most dangerous sport in the world. I'm still not sure what the first one is, but to me it does the sport a disservice. I know when I was writing the book, I knew I had to write about this. I had to write about the danger versus safety element. So I feel there are two sides to this. So first of all, there's me. There's my experience of freediving, there's what I've learned from freediving, and there's the takeaway. And that is so at odds with this extreme adrenaline junkie sport. It just doesn't match up at all. But on the other side of it, there is the real danger element. And, you know, I'd be absolutely fibbing if I said there wasn't an element of danger. But I think the risk that you take as a freediver, as a responsible freediver, it's a calculated risk. You have to be very honest with yourself. You have to park the ego. Absolutely park the ego. So when you start to assess, the water and the dive you're going to do, you're taking in so much information and you're making a responsible decision for yourself and your buddy. So, I get a lot. I used to get a lot of messages on Instagram saying, "Will you teach me how to free dive? Will you write a few tips down?" And off I go. And I'm going, "No, I won't." Or, "How do you free dive?" And I'd say, "Well, without being glib, I'm going to say, take a course. Take a course from a professional, an experienced professional, because you don't cut corners with this sport. You learn to respect the techniques and most of all the safety, and that only comes from a professional. So I'm always, I think, kind of fighting two sides of the argument. Yes, it's dangerous. Yes, you need to respect it. Yes, you need to learn it properly, but also it's not this extreme thing that you might believe it to be. It's incredibly calming. And I know I've just turned into that emoji with love hearts in her eyes. What it is, it lifts the hairs on my arm, the back of my neck when I think about it. It is so calming. It's such an opportunity to learn more about yourself in this really incredible environment. You get to see things that not many people get to see. It is a privilege.
Is that what you felt the first time you did it?
I think so. No, I'm lying. I was on my beginner's course with 3 guys. So what I felt was, I'm not going to be the only girl and I'm not going to be the only one who doesn't hit the targets. So that's what I was thinking. But I do remember, kind of coming in here today, I was thinking about that first, I don't remember the first dive, but I do remember that first course. So that's done over 2 days. I remember the target was 12 meters. So that's the deepest you can go on your first day. I remember going down and I remember looking up, which was essentially down, which is an absolute rookie mistake. I remember looking down towards my target and thinking, oh my God, how do people go deeper in this? Okay, I'm going to do it. And then that's it. I'm finished. And then sure enough, you do it and you go, that was actually kind of easy, and you do it again. And then the next day you can go to 21 and you go, well, I'll just see. So I'm naturally a competitive person with myself and others. They just don't know it. They don't know we're competing. So I know that was the drive, but it wasn't long before I was hooked, and it opened up so much more beyond that.
I can feel it. I can feel it from you. It's really interesting. I can feel the passion for it and the drive for it.
It's funny. I'm nervous talking about freediving sometimes because I haven't done it for a while. So I definitely feel like a little bit of a fraud. But oh God, it's going to sound crazy. I dream about being underwater. And when there has been a gap, I start to dream about doing my everyday tasks, but underwater.
Wow.
And those dreams have been coming hard and fast for a couple of months now.
You need to get in the sea.
I need to get in the sea. I need to get under the sea.
Under the sea, yeah. So you talked about your 20s, how you were living a life you thought that you should be living.
Yeah, trying to.
Not feeling great.
And never quite, like, I always talk about this checklist, and that's what I mean by should be living. So, in your 20s, you're supposed to go on crazy nights out. I did that. Be dating, be maybe meeting your partner, building a career, saving money, moving towards getting engaged, saving for and so on.
So much.
And I wasn't anywhere near that. And the more I tried, it felt like the further I was getting away from this list. And the pressure I felt was so immense. And it's really funny, like once you set that list up as your goal, that gap is a really big source of pain. That gap between where you're at and where you want to be is a really big source of pain. I've learned now to kind of focus on where you actually are and to find the joy and humor and whatever else in that. But I lived in that gap. And it's probably unfair to blame the gap for everything that was going on for me, but it certainly didn't help things.
And you were struggling with your mental health as well.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, I'm okay with naming it. It wasn't anywhere near mental health. It was absolute mental illness.
Okay.
And I think there's a really big difference.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I have been and had been diagnosed at that point. And like, I didn't know my arse from my elbow. And I was trying so hard. And masking, which, you know, is a phrase people are more familiar with these days, masking was probably my full-time job. I was very good at it until I wasn't.
Yeah. What was that moment of change that forced you to?
Oh, there were hundreds of moments. And I think there will always be moments. I think it will always be cyclical. But there's one that stands out. And it was New Year's Eve 2014, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I'd been working in Lambert Puppet Theatre, so I'd done a show that day and probably 100 shows leading up to that.
Because you're a puppeteer as well. Yeah. Which is so
Because my
cool.
CV isn't weird enough. Yeah, met Bosco. It's probably my biggest claim to fame. That's a book in itself.
I hope he lived up to its reputation.
Absolutely. So I worked for the Lamberts for years, and that was just incredible. It was really cool, and it was something I used to always tell the story, and the staff would laugh at me at how much I'd repeat this, but I used to also work in the box office. And behind me there was a poster of a production of Cinderella, I think from 1985.
Wow.
But I had that poster above my bed as a child.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So people would come in and they'd notice the poster, and the people around me going, here she goes with the poster story again. But I thought it was really cool. Like, that poster is so familiar to me.
Yeah.
So, you know, I had done shows, lots of shows in December, and my shoulders were aching. Not a lot of people like New Year's as it is, and I certainly don't.
Yeah.
And I remember my brother, who's 8 years younger than me, was hanging out with his friends. Mum and Dad, I think, were out. He was with his friends in the kitchen. I was sitting in the sitting room. There's glass doors in between, and I was watching True Detective. It's really funny how you remember little specific bits of information.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember just thinking, can I swear?
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Fuck this. Fuck this.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't know what I was telling to fuck this, but just this sense of, this is bullshit. I felt like I had nothing going for me. I was working my ass off. Yeah, I was probably saving money, but life felt so empty. And, you know, just across the doors, I could see a bunch of guys, really lovely guys in their earlier 20s. Yeah, there's an 8-year gap. And they just looked so full of life. Like they were embracing what life was throwing at them. And I felt so jaded. I was only 32 at the time, but I felt so jaded and tired. And my brother, Matt, had been to Colombia for a couple of months, traveling the summer before. So I got out the laptop there and then, and just before the stroke of midnight, booked a ticket to Colombia.
Amazing.
Yeah, that was a solid fuck this moment. It was a real turning point.
But sometimes you need that, you know?
Like an absolute. And like I said, there has been moments of this again and again and again all the way throughout my story and right up to the present day, of just this sensation of the walls are coming in and it's going to take something dramatic to push them back. And they're not going to do it of their own accord. It has to come from me. And at that time, I was like, well, I'm going to go traveling on my own in South America without any Spanish as a single woman, white woman. You know, there are definitely gaps in my plan, but it was something. And it was the beginning of an incredible set of adventures that essentially, they changed my life. So that moment stands out as a turning point.
You know, I think so many people will relate to that feeling of like just the walls closing in. But I think what sets you apart is that not many people necessarily, especially over and over again, make these really brave decisions. And you have made many of them.
Yeah, like there's a really thin line between stupid and brave. Like there is. And it's taking a chance. And it's funny, it's what my work has become about now. And I talk a lot about fear. Yes. And for me, that moment of sitting in the sitting room in Mum and Dad's house, early 30s, single again, online dating, my soul felt like it was just being like sucked out of me.
Yeah.
I can now identify that as fear. I absolutely couldn't at the time, but fear that this is always how it would be.
Yeah.
Fear that I didn't deserve any better.
Mm-hmm.
Fear that, that this was all I deserved.
Yeah.
And the response to that was, no, I reject it. It scares me, but I have to change because this isn't okay for myself. And like that's the theme that keeps coming up for me.
And you talk about fear so much. I mean, you have a whole podcast on fear, which is excellent.
Yeah,
a really great
enjoying
listen.
it.
One way you described fear that really resonated with me was that you called it a shapeshifter, and you kind of touched on it there, but that it can disguise itself as
self-doubt,
as logic, even.
Yeah.
You know, as things that you think, no, this makes sense. I'm listening to this inner voice.
100%. Like fear, it's so sneaky. And the reason why my work has kind of moved towards exploring fear in all its forms was because I have a book. In the middle of the book is a chapter. The day I sat down to write, I checked my notice board and what am I supposed to write today? Dahab 2017. Right, off you go. I opened my laptop and my fingers started, scurrying across the keyboard. And what happened was I started to write something that I hadn't planned. It was nowhere in my pretty haphazard schedule, but it was typing itself. And that chapter probably had the least amount of edits or changes made to it. And that chapter is called Fear. It is probably the chapter I've had the most responses to. So I knew there was something there. And again, when I ask people, what are you afraid of? They'll, no, nothing much. They think spiders or heights or, all the phobias. But actually, fear, like I said, it's a shapeshifter. It can take on the voice of our most responsible self and say, that's not a good idea. From a financial point of view, putting your savings into a podcast, Claire, probably isn't the best step for you. There is an element of that's right, but there also has to be an element of, fuck this. I have to try to see where it goes.
Yeah.
And down the road, maybe I can go, well, now it's not responsible, but you did try. So it's kind of beginning to counter that voice. And that voice can be a lot harsher, a lot crueler. It can be really insidious. It can get under our skin. It can tell us all sorts of lies about ourselves that we actually begin to believe.
Especially when you're hearing it in your head every day, over and over.
And again.
Yeah. And half the battle is recognizing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when I started recognizing it I wrote a list of ways that fear manifests for me. And when I became aware of it, of those sentences that I hear inside my head, when I became aware of it, I genuinely was shocked at how often it happens.
Yeah.
Like if you had a little clicker and counted, it's
hundreds of times a day.
Hundreds of times. So no wonder we're influenced by it.
I've had the same moment a
few
years ago in therapy.
Really?
Yeah. It is amazing. How would you tell people to recognize the fear in their lives?
Kind of just as you said, I think awareness is step one.
Yeah.
And then after that, there are a whole host of ways you can address it. And that's what my podcast is about. So my podcast is called Scared Shitless. Yeah. And it's because it's my permanent state. But now I try not to let that stop me. And it's kind of embracing it. And I think the really wonderful thing, and like how privileged am I get to talk to experts who offer me loads of different ways of combating it. I spoke to Pat Divilly recently, and like chatting to him, I could literally hear my brain going, pooh, pooh, like exploding with these ideas, saying Keith Barry, Tara Rafter, who I know you've chatted to, like these people who've studied different ways that we can get around it. Yeah. So that's what I think the podcast offers, is different ways. And the biggest takeaway has been everyone has these voices. Everyone has these fears. Yeah. People that are known for doing amazing feats or for being brave or putting themselves out there, they all have moments of, oh God, am I good enough? What if this goes tits up? Like they all have that fear.
Absolutely.
But it's how they work through it that to me makes them inspiring. Not what they've done, how they work through it.
Mm-hmm. So how do we, I mean, you said, which I thought was, again, something that really resonated, that fear, especially when it's paired with overwhelm, can just bring you to a standstill.
Yeah. That's the worst combo.
It's a bad
I hate that combination. It's one I get so often.
Yeah.
It is probably my most common state.
And I think a lot of people, I think a lot of women especially, will really relate to that feeling of overwhelm and of fear. And do you know what? I'm just not going to. I'm just going to stick to doing what I'm doing. I'm not going to push the boat out. How do you get moving again when you've come from that state? Like what little steps can you take?
The smallest of steps. So for me, for example, let's use my podcast. I'm starting a new podcast, or I've started a podcast, and it's in its infancy, and I am somewhat impatient, and I want it to grow, and I really believe in it. But podcasts take money, they take marketing, they take all a whole host of things, and it's just me. And I had a moment not too long ago, within the last 24 hours, where I did wonder, what am I doing? Am I shouting into a void? What is my why of this project? And is it big enough to push through those boundaries? And when everything feels so big, like I need to keep on top of social media, and I need to do my research, and I need to book guests, and so on. So you're trying to juggle all that, and it invariably just goes in this massive explosion or implosion, as the case may be, where I say, I don't think I can do it. And that's when I come back to my why. So that has to be really important. And from talking to lots of people, both on the podcast and, in real life, the why seems to be the most important thing. If that's not clear, if that's not strong, it's hard to keep going. And I think with the project, it's easier. When it's personal, it's harder. And for women, I think we tend not to put ourselves forward, or, we take on too much. So doing something just for you, just for your satisfaction, personal development, your growth, your happiness, your contentment might feel too much, or you just don't have time. There'll always be an excuse why not to.
Absolutely.
But putting ourselves forward, finding that one step. And I always say, it's not about, going on a plane to Colombia or free diving or what it is. It could be, do you know what? This year, I said for years I wanted to do a couch to 5K. Right, where are my runners? And I think that moment is so much harder than the big brave things. Yeah. Because it's about committing to yourself and showing up for yourself. So for me, I find where I want to go. I identify it, and then I forget about it because it's too far away. It's too scary. What can I do today that'll move me forward an inch? And it'll make tomorrow a tiny bit easier. And then the next day, right, okay, have that in the bag. And my husband is the champion of all this. He's all about put little wins in the bag. So whether that's showing up for yourself or doing one task on your to-do list, whatever that is. Or, you know what? You're exhausted. You have to rest because tomorrow you got a whole lot of jobs to do. So identify the smallest way that you can make progress. And sometimes that is by doing nothing.
You touched on it there. Motivation. I think sometimes, and I would be guilty of this, we wait for divine inspiration, for motivation to just land on us.
Absolutely.
When actually it's more about consistency and discipline and doing those little things each day.
Yeah.
And you must have found that with training for freediving. And
absolutely. But again, that had a really big why.
Yeah.
Because I was going all in. I went to Dahab to train, and I felt like I'd made such a big song and dance about being the first woman to represent Ireland. So people were watching. So, suddenly pressure, expectation. Yeah. So I felt like I had to follow through. But on the other side of that, I really wanted to do this for myself. I really needed it. I knew I needed it. So that was a pretty big why. As for motivation, like it's so unreliable. It's so unreliable. I am by personality an all or nothing person. I don't think I'm alone in that.
Yeah.
You know, I'll get a big burst of energy and I'm going to do everything. I am like the tortoise and the hare. I am the hare who legs it and then she's asleep in a bush before the finish line. She's knackered. You know,
Me too.
that is me. That's so many of us.
Yeah.
So trying to be a bit more consistent, conserving my energy, which has something that I've had to learn how to do in the last few years.
Thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we live in a world or a society where pushing through,
yes,
you know, is valued.
Yes.
You know, you just push through, you grit your teeth.
Yes.
But I had long COVID or have long COVID. And suddenly I learned I can't do this. So I had to learn a whole new set of very humbling skills. And that has taught me a lot. I have resisted it a lot. But that skill set has served me well.
Yeah. And that skill set is reminds me of the skill set that you talk about from freediving. So like surrendering.
Exactly.
Learning to surrender.
Softness.
Yeah.
Assessing. So this to me is the exact opposite of pushing through, of gritting your teeth, of going for it.
Yeah.
And the more, like, I'm really aware of that word, and the more I'm aware of it, the more I'm hearing it again echoed back to me in the experts that I'm talking to.
Yeah.
You know, in a situation, find softness.
Yeah.
Which quietens the nervous system.
Yeah.
Allows you time to pause, to assess what's going on and what is the best way forward, as opposed to being really reactive, going into that fight or flight, whether that leads to dysregulation or overwhelm or whatever that might be. Quietening, softening, assessing, and then moving forward. It works better for me. It's not my natural state, but it's certainly one that I manage to get a lot further when I apply that more and more.
I don't think it's anyone's natural state.
No.
Not in the modern world that we live in, especially.
Just go.
Yeah. And it's funny, like there's the difference between the knowing when to kind of surrender and accept where you are. Like it really, some of the language really reminds me also of kind of meditation, of like, you know, accepting your thoughts, accepting how you're feeling, noticing it. And then there's the other side of the coin, which is like the courage part, where you're not pushing through, but learning to live alongside the fear, recognizing the fear.
Yeah.
It's such an interesting binary kind of dichotomy. It's fascinating.
You've just like hit my favorite phrase, bingo, with that sentence, because I find throughout so much of my life, my story, my challenges, my achievements, there's always this duality. And it's something that I try to explore in my work and in conversations. And it's the idea that two very opposing emotions can coexist.
Yeah.
The example that I use more recently is last June, my brother and my sister-in-law got married. The family went to Italy. It was an incredible trip. It was really, really stunning, as a wedding in Italy sounds. But at the same time, my husband and I were going through a really difficult, a really raw phase of our fertility journey. And that was, it had come to an end and we had no results. We were, raw is the word that stands out. So we're in this event that is happy, joyous, and I'm seeing my sisters with their kids, which are my nieces and nephews, whom I absolutely adore and cherish and I'm terrified of, all in one delicious auntie sandwich. So all this is happening and it feels, back to overwhelming, it feels like so much. But the pride, oh God, that's where I'll get teary. The pride I had for my brother, the happiness I felt for him, alongside how sad I felt for me and my husband, it made something quite exquisite. Something, it's like a knife edge, it's like a sliver, it's a really unique emotion that is made up of something really painful and something so pure and wonderful at the same time. And that is quite a unique experience, and I will take it every time.
I totally understand. You're reminding me of when my youngest was very small. My dad was very ill at the same time. My youngest was 2 months old and dad was passing away. And it was so beautiful and so heartbreaking and so vulnerable and authentic and raw. And there is something magic there.
And I think those words get thrown out a lot to the point they're at a stage where they might lose their power and their impact.
Yeah.
But just as you've described, one experience doesn't negate the other.
Yeah.
Having a 2-year-old that delights and entertains you and brings you so much joy doesn't take away from the pain of losing your like someone so beloved to you. Yeah. And similarly, what you're going through with your dad doesn't change the joy that, it's learning that both of these can coexist.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is the sort of emotional resilience or dexterity that we should be learning, that we should be exercising, that we should be trying to embrace, because that's where the really magical shit is.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. Take me back to using those tools, to being the first woman to represent Ireland at the World Freediving Championships. What was going through your head? What were you focused on your mindset?
I was trying to be. Again, that whole experience is overwhelming, but so incredible. Like, I'm still talking about it 6 years later. I did a whole book out of it. It was incredible. It taught me so much about myself. There is a moment that's just come into my head. I was queuing up. We had to register our dives at the start of the competition. And I was queuing up beside one of the deepest divers in the world. And
what does that look like? How deep is the deepest diver going?
At the time, he held the world record, I think he still does, for deepest dive in the discipline called no fin. So it looks like a kind of a breaststroke. And that was 104 meters. Chances are I'm getting these numbers wrong. And some free divers listening going, no, Claire, represent your sport better. I think it's 104. Anyway, his name is William Trubridge, and he's really famous. And there he was in front of me, William Trubridge, Claire Walsh. He's from New Zealand, I'm from Ireland, and he's diving to a depth and I'm diving like a quarter of that. But we're in the same competition. And that was a real like, what the fuck moment. And I think it's, one of those moments where you try to sneak, you get a selfie. So it's twisting, just kind of going, look who's in front of me. But it was a real moment of, look where you are. And I think with that, there was a bit of embarrassment of, what am I doing here? Who do I think I am?
But you'd qualified and you trained and you...
Yeah, but like it wasn't all that hard to qualify.
Listen.
But the point is, it has taken me a couple of years to reflect on that. And I now say that my biggest achievement, it wasn't my depth. And that's the truth. This isn't me being faux humble. I'm not a deep diver in the world of competitive freediving. However, that does not mean that there was a huge achievement in terms of, like, this isn't creeping inside your comfort zone. This is giving yourself an almighty shove outside it.
Yeah.
And I did it. And I followed through. And I put myself out there in a way that still stands to me today. That is an achievement. So yeah, that experience, I will forever be grateful for. There was a parade before the event started, and I walked with the tricolour draped around my neck. I was holding like a sign saying Ireland. I actually held my little nephew who came over to watch. He was 1 at the time, and he walked some of the parade with me. Again, core memories. I think I'll be if I'm lucky enough to live to my 80s, that's still something that I will sit and take out of the memory box and look at from time to time and feel incredibly proud.
Yeah, as you should.
Yeah,
and it's so
cool.
nice to hear someone be proud and to say, like, I did that.
I did.
That's
do
an
that.
unusual thing. Like,
And
women
it's not
are
an
so
easy thing, to be fair. And I definitely fall into the category. I feel like I need to justify it first. I need to give all my disclaimers. Like, I'm not that deep a diver, which I'm not. And there's lots of people who's better than me. And there's other Irish free divers now, and they're doing a really great, I feel like I have to give a big context where actually, to sit with this feeling of pride feels completely congruent with the experience. I'm not putting myself out there as the deepest free diver in the world or the best Irish free diver by a long shot. But you know what? That was a really big deal for me.
Yeah.
And I'm really proud of how I moved through it, how I conducted myself through it, and what I took from it.
I'm proud of you too.
Thank you.
Talk to me about the actual, am I right that you passed out?
Blacked out. Yeah. Not. So what's the opposite of pride? That was a moment.
Scary.
Yeah, it was scary. It was scary. It's really incredible to show what training does, because my last memory is being underwater. And I remember looking up. I remember thinking I need to rotate a little bit so that I come up in front of the judges because there's a platform.
Wow.
So I remember doing that, and that's the last thing I remember. But what actually happened was I kept going. I came up and I started what's called a surface protocol, and then I blacked out. But the funny thing there isn't, it kind of touches upon that deprecation or playing myself down a little bit. You can bring a coach into the water, and what the coach does is when you come up on your line, they will shout instructions at you. So if you're borderline hypoxic and you hear a nice, clear voice that you recognize saying, Claire, breathe, giving that instruction, chances are that'll be enough to jolt you into action.
Okay.
I didn't bring a coach with me. I didn't think I deserved it. I thought my dive was too shallow and that it would be embarrassing, or that I'd be treating myself, like throwing flowers at myself, or I'd have notions. So I didn't bring a coach into the water.
Wow. I've got goosebumps when you're talking.
That was a little bit of a learner. That's not the phrase. That was something that stands out. But the scary part of that was when I came to, I was being given a rescue breath by a French guy, and I was kind of swatting him away. And I realized what had happened. And my biggest concern was this was being recorded, and I didn't know where it had happened. I also know how blackouts can look. And my parents were there. And I was really concerned about what they had just seen. And I tried to look for the camera. And in my head, what I did was located a camera and went, you're grand. And what that looked like in reality was just, like what it looked inside my head versus outside my head is two very different things. And as soon as I got back to the boat, I text them, I'm fine, I'll be back soon. It's all good. And I think I just wanted to make it okay for them. My ego was probably on the floor. It wasn't the nicest start, and it's really funny because I do wish it was different, but it's probably a lesson that I have learned the most from.
Absolutely. There's nothing
anything else.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Of what serves you and what doesn't, of when to go, no, I deserve that person in the water. And as another diver said to me, a friend of mine, your whatever meter it was dive is the equivalent of another diver's 100. You're going to give it your all. They're going to give it your all. You deserve the same support. As well, me, or maybe as women, maybe we're not great at accepting help when it's there for us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's your clip of the episode. I don't know if we're great at doing that. I can do it myself. Oh, sure, look, I'll do it. Go on. That kind of dismissing help when it's available to us. It's no wonder we kind of go full tilt into overwhelm.
Absolutely. Was it difficult to get back in the water after that?
Yep, 100%. Oh, God, I was dreading it. There was some storms. So I know my next dive was kind of pushed back a couple of days. The longer went on, the longer it kind of shouldn't it. So I announced a really conservative dive. And I remember chatting to a couple of friends, also free divers before that, going, what if it happens again? And they gave me some really nice tips. And it's on YouTube, the video of the dive. And at the end, I come up and it's a clean dive. It's a national record. And I celebrate. I have the white tag in my hand, which is what you bring up from the bottom plate. And I fling my arm backwards and I started laughing. And that moment isn't a celebration of the dive. It's me making up with free diving, because for a couple of days there we were fighting and I didn't know if we were going to ever be friends again because I didn't trust it. I suddenly went, oh, I don't know why that happened, but it happened. And oh God, what if it happens again? And I've no, but this was such a joyous moment of, okay, we're friends again. We got this. We know how to work our way through.
We're back together.
We're back together. We can announce it. It's official. It was such a lovely, joyous moment. I love watching that video.
Yeah.
It's so...
Did your parents see that one?
No, they'd gone home at that point.
Oh, no.
But they watched it on YouTube, and the support for it was incredible. Yeah.
What was going through your head when you first went down? Like, what does go through your head? Are you counting?
So the first dive I remember a lot more, and it really, really shows how much energy our thoughts consume. So when you're free diving, you're trying to be as efficient as possible with your movements, because movements consume oxygen and you're limited with your oxygen, and you want to make it down and up with enough oxygen to spare.
Yeah.
It's the general, goal. So, my movements were trained, but the difference was I was probably thinking a lot more. I don't remember being particularly nervous. And this is kind of the same way I talk about fear. I didn't identify one thing as nerves, but I was feeling really emotional. So the same way fear, I don't identify something as fear, but actually it's being disguised. And the nerves were the same. I was really emotional that morning. I was trying to fake it till I made it. I felt like, I've used this so many times, the Jamaican bobsled team. I was trying to emulate the other athletes because they belonged there, but I didn't. So I was trying to copy what they did. Again, like, none of this is authentic. None of this is being true to yourself. So no wonder it didn't go well. There is one moment I remember. So you do this kind of stroke. It's like a keyhole stroke. And I remember my hand coming down by my side, and underwater, I could feel it shake. And I noticed. And, I knew enough to not think too much about it.
Yeah.
But even that shake, that's excessive movement.
Okay. Wow.
That's telling me something. Yeah, that's probably my last thought, aside from that I need to start turning and rotating.
Wow.
So there was a lot going on in my head, and it was coming into my hands, probably was going into my feet. So I'm using more and more oxygen. And again, it's that message of, we often wonder, why are we so tired? But we might have gotten a good night's sleep. What's your brain doing? Because that's using up so much of your energy. And that's where I saw what an effect that can have.
And now, or after that, or maybe before, you sing songs in your head.
Yeah. Well, like, singing is kind of my go-to. If you've had the misfortune of spending a long time with me, like, I'm always singing. It is my screensaver mode. It's lovely in theory until you're living with it, singing every single Instagram reel song kind of on repeat. So, I sing all the time. And whilst kind of it's part of my personality, and that's all well and good, but it does have a practical application. It connects me to my breathing.
It's kind of a beat as well.
Exactly. It takes me out of my head. It, humming the vibration, triggers the vagus nerve. So there is a knock-on effect. But for me, it feels like me. It reminds me of who I am. It reminds me that I don't have to do what the other athletes are doing, whether that's yoga breathing or pranayama or yoga stretches. I can do this and I can center myself in my way. And that's really empowering. Anytime I go to do talks, and, you know, I'm lucky enough to do quite a few of them, I sing in the car. I do my vocal warm-ups as I would if I was doing a singing performance.
Okay.
So it's a part of a bigger routine. It's part of a pattern of preparation of, you know, this is how we're going to move forward with the next thing.
What's your go-to song?
This never makes me sound cool. At the moment, I'm singing a song from a musical called Merrily We Roll Along. But invariably, there's going to be some Disney in there. There'll definitely be Hamilton. Defying Gravity, obviously, is a really big thing.
Oh, of course.
But the original, not the film, like, it gets complicated. You know, it's always musicals. It's always Disney. It's something really, really cheesy and really, really irritating.
I don't know why, but I knew you were going to say that.
I know. Yeah.
Amazing. Are you scared of anything now?
I'm scared of everything now. I'm scared of everything. And I think, like, you can't move on Instagram without reading something about perimenopause. And I don't know if it's that, or I don't know if it's kind of what I've been through in the last couple of years. But I feel scared a lot of the time. It's funny, I always say that sentence, and I say it kind of as a joke, but not really. But I am scared a lot of the time, scared about so much. And I am most scared that I will let that fear make my world small. That's my biggest fear. So much of what I try to do is, it's not keep that fear at bay, but something you said earlier on, it's live alongside it. I can acknowledge it. I can notice the ways it shows up for me physically, mentally, emotionally. And I try to go, right, okay, what's coming up here? I try to examine it. I try to chat to it. I try to have a playful curiosity towards it. And most of all, I try not to let it hold me back.
What would you say to people who might be listening, who might feel that stuck, who might, due to grief, due to just day-to-day monotony, feel stuck, feel like they're being held back?
I'm going to tag in Tara Rafter here, because something she said when I chat to her about fear has been one of the biggest, you know, banners in my head. So when I have felt stuck, and whether that's due to grief or mental illness or life just feeling tedious or monotonous, like, that also can happen. So when I'm feeling full of self-doubt, or like this is how it'll always be, God, look at my capacity. So yeah, those big projects like head off to Colombia, participate in the World Championships. I've tried to run a marathon. You know, I love those really big, all-encompassing projects. But sometimes the real challenge is doing day-to-day life a little bit differently. So, and the part about Tara is she said, look at your capacity. I think that's really an important one, because we do live in a world where, you know, having a little peek into other people's life is so accessible through social media. So it's easy to say, everyone else is doing it, why can't I?
Yeah.
And I think there's no point doing this. There's no point pushing yourself if you're going to add shame onto that.
Yeah.
Life's hard enough. Give yourself a break. And that's when that sentence from Tara really helps me. Look at your capacity. So assessing, softening, assessing, am I in a physical or mental or emotional situation where I can set out to do marathon training? No. So what can I do? So it doesn't have to be this big, brave, Instagrammable event. It can be something really, really simple. So that person who's feeling stuck, who's feeling isolated, who's self-doubt, or just wants life to look a little bit different, make a phone call. Chat with your sister. Maybe that's your first step. Or maybe that's a step for next week, because now you need to sit with yourself. And maybe it is going, you know what? I need a day to completely switch off. So it's about being really, really, really honest about what you need, what you have the capacity for, and taking that step to meeting that need. Now that's kind of repetitive, but it is moving forward in a way that is soft and compassionate. Having learned the hard way, doing this work without compassion is just, it's more punishment.
Claire Walsh. That is where I'm going to have to leave it for today. Thank you so much. You've been a beautiful guest.
Such a pleasure. I'm honoured to sit here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Wellness Project. This is the part where I ask you to please like and subscribe. It really does help us reach new listeners, and I know so many people could benefit from a conversation like that one. Remember also to keep an eye on image.ie for lots more information and insights and expert advice on all things wellness. I will chat to you next week, and until then, please do mind yourself. The Wellness Project is sponsored by Activia and Irish Life Health.